Hello, my friends. My name is Jake. I do Pathfinder 2 videos on things like archetypes, classes, ancestries, and builds. Today we're going to be continuing our APG series, Advanced Player's Guide, Archetypes, starting with the Familiar Master, and then we're going to move on to the Gladiator, and then the Herbalist. Let's go. The Familiar Master. Familiar Master Dedication starts at level 2. You get a Familiar. If you already have a Familiar, you get an Enhanced Familiar, which allows you to choose more Familiar options or Master options. The easiest way to see all of them together is to just go to Archives of Nethys and look up Familiar. There are a lot of variety of abilities, but no matter what, it's not like Familiars are going to be casting spells for you or turning the tide of a battle. There are no other requirements to starting this archetype except be 2nd level. The additional feat is Enhanced Familiar, but if you already have a Familiar, then you take Familiar Master Dedication, then you get Enhanced Familiar for free, so you don't really need the additional feat, it doesn't matter. Unless you're like a fighter. You made a friend with a lizard, see? He's joined you on your journeys, isn't he cute? Familiar Mascot. At level 4, you can take this archetype feat that allows you to grant one of the familiar abilities or master abilities to a friend. Like maybe that ranger tends to get hit with arrows all the time because his holy symbol is a bullseye. And he might need some occasional healing, so you can choose that ability for your familiar, and once during the fight, the familiar can go over to your ally and peck him on the shoulder, scare the crap out of him, and heal him. That could be useful. At level 4, Familiar Conduit, you spend an action, and you have to already have line of effect to your familiar, and then whatever spell you cast comes from your familiar. So you can fire around corners, or down ravines if your familiar can fly, and you really can't. I guess it's a silly, sometimes really useful feat, but your GM has to really pay attention to the scenario, and they have to basically set up areas where it's hard for you to do things so that you have to do this. It's not always useful. I wouldn't take it. As fun and silly as it sounds. Improve Familiar, level 6. This allows you to get a special familiar with a lower cost, so you can give that familiar more abilities. Certain special familiars, like the Crawling Hand, which is great, I have to include that in a build, costs a certain number of abilities for the familiar. Like a number of points, basically. So let's say it normally costs 6. This makes it only cost 4, so that you can spend whatever the heck you have left at that point, I guess 2, to spend on abilities. One interesting interaction is with Improved Familiar, if you choose as your specific familiar the Puppet only requires 1 ability in order to get the Puppet, and this archetype feat reduces it by 2. You don't gain an extra 1, you just lose the extra 1. So choose something that's cooler than a puppet, even though I love puppets. I'm not you. Do whatever you like. Crawling Claw, good one. Level 8's feat, Mutable Familiar, allows you to, once per day, you can do a 10-minute ritual to reselect physical abilities that your familiar has for different physical abilities. You can't choose different abilities that a familiar of that type has to have, like birds have to have flight, so you can't take away flight. But you could make your bird also amphibious by taking away some other ability. It's okay. I mean, that's it. It's okay. It's occasionally useful. If you know that your party is going to be going into a lot of different terrains, that is a reason you would take this. Otherwise, you selected the abilities for the familiar already, and you can already upgrade to a different specific familiar that has cooler abilities. This just doesn't do much. At 10th level, the feat Incredible Familiar allows you to choose 6 familiar or master abilities each day instead of 4. So you get a slight little bump in power. It's really just something that makes your familiar a little bit more durable or a little bit more flexible. It's not going to do a whole lot for your character or your campaign or your party. Overall, the Familiar Master isn't very powerful. It gives you more flexibility with familiars. Well, with 1 familiar. Really, it should have given you more familiars. That would be really fun. or allow you to have additional abilities that not anybody else can take. Like my little Drake here can spit fire. Well, alligator lizard thing. That's a dinosaur. The dinosaur can spit fire. Sadly, that's all we have to say about the Familiar Master. Moving on. Not that great. Gladiator. Okay, so we go from to with the Gladiator. Gladiator Dedication at level 2 gives you gladiatorial lore, which is sure to come up all the time. And at the start of a combat encounter, if you have spectators, which I'll get to in a second, you gain temporary hit points equal to your character level. You can also roll performance for your initiative. So the spectator thing. This archetype is based entirely around having people watching you. These have to be sentient creatures that are not aligned with you or the enemy. So, bystanders. They can't be people who already like you. They certainly can't be your party. And they can't be people you just paid to follow you around. Because you paid them. They're on your side, technically. Because all of these abilities revolve around that scenario, the setting has to include spectators for most of these abilities, certainly all the best abilities. It's only going to be useful in adventures that the GM has set up to allow spectators. Like if the GM gave everybody the Gladiator archetype, they're a jerk because this sucks, but also that could be useful at least. If you have like a whole adventure around fighting in an arena and like getting cheered on by the crowd. Fancy moves at level 4 allows you to use performance to demoralize instead of intimidation. Okay, but you're a fighter. Like you probably already have intimidation. So, but I don't. Play to the crowd is level 4 feat. It's a reaction. If you drop an enemy to 0 hit points, and it's not a trivial encounter, so it's not just like a kobold, but it's an actual decent fight, your GM will tell you if it counts. You can attempt a performance check. On a success, you get one of 3 benefits. One is temporary hit points equal to your level. Another is +1 to your AC, or +1 to the next attack that you take. All of these only last, the hit points last for a minute. The other 2 abilities last until the end of your next turn. You have to have spectators, and it's minor benefits. Again, it's thematic. That's about it. I'm sorry, not all archetypes are amazing. This one's not. Level 4, stage fighting. You don't take the usual -2 circumstance penalty when making non-lethal attacks with a weapon or unarmed attack that doesn't have the non-lethal trait. Just take Bounty Hunter. It's better than this entire archetype. You basically just know how to hurt people without killing them. Bleh. Performative weapons training. At level 6, you get performative weapons training, and that gives you proficiency in special flashy weapons, which I gotta say, would be fun. And this is one of the only ways you can get some of these proficiencies, so that's cool. You're trained with the bow staff, dueling cape, spiked chain, sword cane, and whip. Anytime you gain proficiency with one of your other weapons, these also go up. That's just flavor. Frankly, I think this should be a feat that like anybody could take. Because why do you have to go this deep into Gladiator before you can get that? Bleh. Call your shot, level 8. When you successfully play to the crowd, so you have to have spectators, you can, instead of any of those other 3 little abilities that I said, you can choose a creature within 30 feet that can see you to become frightened 1. Yay. Okay, it is cool in that it just does it. There's no saving throw they get. They're just afraid of you. Cool, but you still have to have spectators and you still have to drop an enemy to 0. Now, with Firebrands that came out, there are 2 additional feats for the Gladiator. It does make a difference. It's nice to have extra feats for your archetypes, and I believe this is the first book that's ever had additional feats for archetypes. So the first one is Living for the Applause, level 8 feat. Once per day when you would be reduced to 0 hit points but not immediately killed during a combat encounter that has spectators, You can instead remain at 1 hit point and your wounded condition increases by 1. You don't have to roll anything for that. You can roll a performance check. You're trying to make an impression on the crowd. On a success, I'll read this. The crowd erupts in applause and cheers at your comeback, much to the dismay of your enemies. Really? When the crowd applauds, you get +1 to your AC until the end of your next turn, because your opponent is dismayed that the crowd is against him and he's worried about hurting you. Alright, yeah, alright, that's what it says. On a critical success, this is the cool part. You don't expend your daily use of living for the applause, and you can use the reaction an additional time on the same day. So if you get a critical success on your performance check to make an impression on the spectators, you can just keep using this as long as you keep getting the critical success until you die, because your wounded level still increases. But it looks impressive. Totally looks impressive. Most adventures still not going to be useful because spectators. Whatever. The last and 10th level ability for the Gladiator is Big Debut. It's a free action. I do want to say that I like that this book expanded the Gladiator to a higher level. So it just made the archetype broader. That's cool because it offers more options and features. So Big Debut does not require spectators, and that's really cool. So once per day, when you're about to roll initiative, you use a free action, and I have to read this because it's silly. You strike a dramatic pose, deliver a snappy quip, or reveal a shocking new costume, captivating everyone who can see you. Does it have to be a costume? Can you just like rip off your clothes? I mean, that would be shocking. Anyway, you don't roll an ish. You go last, and your opponent has to make a will save based on your class DC or spell DC. If they fail, they are stunned 1, so they lose their next action, because obviously they lose their next action. You're naked all of a sudden. Anyway, so if they critically fail, they get stunned 2, so they lose their next 2 actions. As your first action on your first turn, you can interact to draw or stow an item of light bulk as a free action if this item is a small garment or accessory, such as a fan, a pair of gloves, or a wine glass. You gain a +1 circumstance bonus on charisma-based skill checks until the end of your turn. Like Intimidate, that part's useful, but I'm picturing a naked wrestler holding a wine glass. What the hell? Okay, so if you just want to be completely freaking silly as a fighter, just take this. It's so great. Obviously, it's for flavor. Otherwise, it's just not that wonderful. Okay, so overall for the Gladiator, as you could probably tell from everything I've said along the way, not a fan. I am not one of the spectators. I'm actually specifically against this archetype. It's cool art though. He looks like he's in a car wreck, like he's currently experiencing a car accident. Anyway, moving on, because Gladiator is meh. Herbalist is awesome. It's utility, so it's not like blow your enemies apart awesome, but it is extremely useful. Alright, at level 2, Herbalist Dedication, you have to be trained in nature and have the natural medicine feat. It immediately increases your proficiency in nature to expert, and it allows you to create herbal alchemical items. You gain the basic alchemy benefits. You can use nature instead of craft to craft herbal items instead of crafting. And the herbal items are alchemical items with the healing trait plus antidote and anti-plague. That includes things like vaccine as well. You gain batches of infused reagents per day equal to your level or half your level if you didn't make your daily preparations in the wilderness. So it's a little bit less powerful than alchemy, but anybody can take it. And this can be tacked on to anybody, and they can heal just as default. Sometimes even in combat or out of combat. For herbal items, the easiest way to find out what all of them are, as most of you probably know, Archives of Nethys. It includes, interestingly, a Focus Cathartic, which can be used on a Psychic to allow them to get back into their power swing and do extra damage sooner. So it removes their stupefied condition so that they can go back to blasting the hell out of people. That's cool. So like it's a healing thing that can do damage to enemies if you have a psychic, sort of. The elixirs of life are the best reason to take this. You also get things that are against poisons and diseases, and the archetype only gets better from here. There's another category of items called alchemical plant items. They're considered herbal items for the herbalist. There's a link to them on Archives of Nethys in the Herbalist Dedication feat. I'll also put a link in the description so they're easier to access. Fresh ingredients, level 2. It requires Herbalist Dedication and Expert in Nature, which you have to have if you took Herbalist Dedication, which you have to have in order to take fresh ingredients. Like, why did I even put that in there? Whatever. When using natural medicine to treat wounds, you can spend a batch of herbs that you get from Herbalist Dedication, so equal to your level if you're in the wilderness, or half your level if you're not in the wilderness, to gain the +2 circumstance bonus for having fresh ingredients even if not in the wilderness. If you spend a batch of herbs in the wilderness, it goes up to +4. So the closer you are to nature physically, the better you are at healing people and keeping your party alive. I have to say, in most adventures that I've run, it's in the forest or wilderness or mountains that has sparse forest because I like nature. And since this is set in a world that is sort of idealized fantasy, or post-apocalyptic, depending on who you ask, there are lots of natural places. So this is usually going to be extremely useful. Level 4, Poultice Preparation. This is probably my favorite ability. When you create an herbal elixir, you can prepare it as a poultice instead. A poultice, in general, for those of you who don't know, is basically it's like a bandage preparation. It can instead be it can be wrapped in leaves. It's medicine, ointment, oil that is applied directly to a wound, and it's either stays there because the patient is resting, or you wrap it tight. So it's pressed against the wound the whole time, and it infuses its magical healing properties, in this case, directly into the patient. So among other things, that means that you can use this to help people who are currently sickened, because sickened people can't drink potions to get over the sickened, but you can apply a poultice. A poultice gains the oil trait, but remains alchemical, not magical, and loses the elixir and ingested traits. You can apply a poultice by interacting with one hand. When you apply it, in addition to its normal effects, the recipient can immediately roll to save against a persistent acid, bleed, or fire damage effect. This is great. This can get your whole team out of a sticky situation really quickly. It has an interesting interaction. I want to preface this first with, I have looked for errata on this. I have seen nothing against it, so as far as I can tell, it works. If you have the Cauldron feat, so presumably you're a witch, or you have the witch archetype, instead of being able to create 4 of these poultices per batch of herbs, you can create 6 per batch. And at level 4, that's 24 poultices if you're a witch. This is great. I would totally use this as an NPC to like sell the players, or just let them have like a rest area to patch up. Let's go see the bog witch Hagatha again. Because y'all are idiots and keep lighting yourselves on fire. Endemic Herbs, they're level 6 feat. You have to be trained in survival as well. This allows you to apply specific benefits to your herbal cures, whatever you're using them for, depending on what kind of terrain you're in. So this will change everywhere you go. There are a couple of standouts for me here. So you find medicinal plants endemic to your location. The benefit lasts for 1 minute, unless otherwise stated. The 2 standouts for me are swamp. If you're in a swamp, your poultices or elixirs or whatever additionally remove 1 source of persistent bleed damage. There's no save, it just removes it. That's amazing. You do have to spend one additional batch of your herbs during preparation to use any of these effects, but personally, if you were in the wilderness and you have all of these skills, you're in the area that you use these, why would it take extra of your herbs? You're there using them. So I wouldn't make people pay that. I know it's mechanical, but it doesn't make any sense to me. So the other standout I see is, if you're in a forest, you can make any of your herbal items give the recipient a +2 circumstance bonus to saves against disease and poison effects. Disease and poison effects are everywhere, and so are forests. So that's probably the biggest benefit for this archetype feat. The other abilities are, if you're in an aquatic environment, the recipient gains a +1 circumstance bonus to fortitude saves. If it's an Arctic environment, for 1 hour, treat environmental cold effects as if they were one step less severe. In desert, it's the opposite. For 1 hour, treat environmental heat effects as if they were one step less severe. In mountains, gain a +1 circumstance bonus to reflex saves. Plains, gain a +1 circumstance bonus to will saves. And underground, gain a +1 circumstance bonus to perception. Overall, this is always going to be a minor benefit. I would totally take this. I had to wear my Kitty Witch shirt for the Poultice Preparation Cauldron. They can't hear me if I'm going back like this to show my shirt. They just can't. Fuck it. Expert Herbalism at level 6. Your advanced alchemy level for herbalism increases to your level -3. That is at any point at which you take this. So if you take it level 6, okay, it's now 3. But if you wait until like level 10, you suddenly have the ability to access level 7 formulas and under. You gain the formulas for elixirs of life as soon as your advanced alchemy level is high enough to create them. Lesser at 8th, moderate at 12th, greater at 16th, and major at 18th level. So if you have this archetype at level 6, regardless of what else your character can do, you are a battle medic and a restorative healer for after combat. This is something that everybody should take if they're not taking anything else with their free archetypes. If they don't have an idea, or if it's a new player, just be like, okay, you're an herbalist. Especially if they're a witch. Just for that one minor little ability thing, because it's cool. And we have one final ability. It was added in the Knights of... Wait, what the hell's the fuck it is? And we have one final ability. It was added in the Knights of Last Wall book. It's a level 4 feat for the Herbalist. It's called Gravelands Herbalist. You have to additionally be trained in religion in order to do this, and you have to be part of the Knights of Last Wall to have access to it. And what it does is it allows you to make one more recipe, Last Wall Soup. It automatically improves gradually as you level. But what Last Wall Soup does is it serves as a meal for the day, that you don't need to eat any other food that day. And it gives you bonuses to hiding from only undead for an hour. Woo! This is the crappiest ability the Herbalist gets. But it's from one of the crappiest books that Pathfinder 2 has. So it's understandable. Seriously, the Knights of Last Wall, they should have just, like, all the archetypes from there, all of the everything from there should have just been a little bit more powerful. And that is all of the archetypes we're going to cover for today. Let me know in the comments if you have anything to add to this, if you've played an Herbalist or seen one in play, or if you've ever played a Gladiator. Please, somebody tell me you've played a Gladiator and it does something cool. I want to know, like, interesting interactions, story of what happened in the arena, when the crowd cheered you and cut a dude's head off with a trident. It could happen. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you very much. And thank you to my wonderful patrons, without which I could do nothing. Except wallow and die. That's it. That's the ending. I don't know. Bye.